and
That's when we choose to go live.
that's when we choose to go live.
Hank, you
How in the
monster.
world? All right, Hank, I got you, man. I got
The
you.
channel's
Hello,
flooding
everybody.
now.
Welcome to the 60-day novel challenge, week 4. And
Wow.
we were just talking about, preparation that novelists go through for if
We're
if
professionals. We're
yeah,
professionals.
depending on when this actually went live. Josh in his previous
Hilarious.
life was a bomb tech for the police department, and he was talking about training that they had to go through.
That was amazing. Amazing work, Hank. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Noted for later.
Yeah, write that down.
All right. Hi, everyone. As Hank said, welcome to week 4 of the 60-day novel challenge with your esteemed hosts, Josh Hayes, Hank Garner, and myself, Doug Lansborough. And you guys are esteemed for now. Remember, it's in flux. It's
goes up and down.
This week, we are talking about wrapping everything up. All the work that we've done over the last 3 weeks, we're pulling it all together. We're getting set up for next week, November 1st, when we actually start writing a novel in a single month. 50,000 words in a single month. It's going to be epic. We're very excited, but there's still some prep work that we have to do. So if you've peeked ahead at your exercises, I know some folks are ahead. Some folks are just, keeping up with us, or they're starting the exercises on the day of the live stream. Whichever way you do it, that's fine. But we're going to be talking about today themes, plotting, and goal setting, which is all very exciting. Steph, nice to see you. Sorry that yesterday's writing sprint didn't go so well.
I actually missed most of yesterday's writing sprint,
Yeah.
so I've heard several things alluded to. What exactly happened? Did Marius
I think we can touch base
show
about
up?
that after, because I was absent for the first little bit too.
Okay, all right. Well, that's a question for Robert then. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Doug, did you get a fresh
It
haircut for
wasn't
this
me.
week's show?
I could just say it wasn't me.
I got it just for this week's show. Actually, I thought to myself, I want to look really good.
It looks like you
all the
got your
folks
money's
joining
worth.
us. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're going to focus on themes, setting up the plot grid and plotting, and then talking about goal setting and staying motivated. All kind of separate things, but all of them stem from all the work that you've been doing so far. And themes we're going to touch on first, but I do want to give a little bit of a disclaimer here that when it comes to themes and when it comes to plotting, you're only going to do as much as you want to do, or as much as you feel you need to do. A lot of people don't think about themes until they actually start writing, or some folks don't go into a book thinking about a particular theme and it just kind of emerges as you write. Some people go into a book with a particular theme in mind, and that kind of skews or gauges how you write particular scenes or particular characters. And then when it comes to plotting, I know all of us up here do some form of plotting or another, but some people plot, to their heart's content, and it becomes the most beautiful outline you've ever seen. Some people hate plotting, and the idea of outlining your story ahead of time just does not appeal to you. I'm going to, in this session today, argue that you should do more plotting specifically for this challenge. I like doing more plotting in general, but for this challenge in particular, a little more plotting than normal, but we'll get to that when we get there. That was my introduction spiel. Hank, Josh, how are you two doing today?
I was doing great until Hank hit the live button.
Look, I didn't know you were going all Breaking Bad in that story. That's my bad, and I apologize. But
I'm doing great otherwise.
Responsibility. Yeah, I'm pretty fantastic. I have completely rebooted my 60-day challenge novel, and but we can talk about that later.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely want to hear about that.
It's very interesting. It's very
I decided to write a completely different book, but this is the month to make those decisions, not next month. So
hey, and at least you're doing it now, and you're not deciding this on October 31st, the night before we start.
Right? That's correct. That's the idea.
Well, and I apologize for missing last week. I've been catching up yesterday and today. Been catching up on some of the pre-planning and the outlining. I've been working on my quote unquote plot grid in Dabble because I don't use it correctly, and I just kind of throw stuff around. But I have been doing a lot of that, and I've spent more time than necessary probably on Google Maps and on the interwebs doing research. And I haven't gone down very many rabbit holes this week, although I did do a lot of research on the CIA in the 1970s in Chile, which is very interesting. But other than that, I'm doing fantastic.
I was thinking before we started the show here, Josh was telling us about some of the research he was doing, and it like part of me is happy that I just write fantasy and I make up 99% of it in my head.
Well, where's the fun in
Another part
that?
of me is like sometimes I really want to embrace those real world locations and that real history, and rather than just be inspired by something, go, okay, this is for the CIA, this is MK Ultra, and here's the
Right.
effects that it's had on someone,
Oh,
rather
yeah.
than what can my fictional version of this thing that happened be. So
Yeah, and I've actually had. There's only two projects that I've ever worked on in my quote unquote professional career that I've had to do real world research on, and all the rest of it is science fiction. I can make everything up. I still do research, and then I kind of extrapolate things and make my own deal, but I don't have to like research what kind of government a certain
mhm.
place has and how it operates and when it was established and all that because I could just make it all up. Um, the one the For this novel I'm doing that, and I ghost wrote a novel several years ago that was kind of like a USA version of James Bond, and it was set in DC. And part of the end of the novel was this kind of high speed chase with a semi truck with a nuclear bomb on it. And so I had to like set up these checkpoints on this road and like measure out the distance and then calculate times and figure out like all of this stuff. And it was fun. It just took a long time to
Yeah.
get everything right because I didn't want to, set it. I didn't want to start the chase and then like an hour later they've gone like 2 miles. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I guess in the template that we have and in the plan that we have for this challenge, there isn't really that much of a research part to it because not all genres need that, right?
Mm,
Sci-fi,
right.
fantasy. But there was world building in the first week. And so if, for anyone watching now or later, if your genre or story does involve real world stuff, that's where you want to do your research in. But in the books that I co-authored, they're set in Austin, Texas. Never been. Never been before in my life. So, I'm on Google Maps. I'm Googling restaurants in Austin and, government buildings and developments and laws and all this stuff. And it was fun. And that's, urban fantasy more than that. So that's a modern day setting, which whenever I write urban fantasy again, I will have to do that research. But yeah, it was cool. But time consuming for sure.
Oh, I
It
bet.
was interesting while I was trying to there's a scene in the book where the characters pick up his college age daughter from a cafe, and this is where they kind of see the first glimpse of the Korean spies that are there. And so I'm kind of moving my mouse around the map of the city where it's at. And I'm like, where is the downtown? Like, I know that this town is big, and I'm in this thing, and I'm going, and then I finally zoom out and realize that it's two separate sections, and there's one section to the south and another section to the north, and the section to the north is actually the bigger kind of metroplex area.
Hmm.
And then just by random, I found the university, and then by happy accident, there is a cafe like a block away from
Oh,
there
nice.
that works out on a one-way street. And then also there was a like kind of a small business with a loading dock that's on this street. It's a one-way street, and this loading dock just happens to be like 2 blocks away, which would be a great spot for the spies to be sitting and observing kind of thing. And so it kind of worked out just by accident.
Mhm.
But it's fun to look at that stuff and kind of figure out where you can put things in this particular project anyway.
Yeah.
Doug, I've wanted to ask you this before and I've just never thought about it. But when you're writing that book set in Austin and you are in northeast Canada, or I guess southeast Canada, technically,
It's all north.
whatever. You're in Canada. You're on the
It gets
eastern
pretty
side of
north.
Canada. Yeah, yeah. Uh, I know you can get the lay of the land of
Mhm.
Austin from Google Maps, and there are, plenty of websites where you can see, places of note and interest and all that. But how did you get a flavor for the people, for the characters of Austin?
Um, Jane here saying we all live in igloos. Not during the
That's right.
summer when it
I
becomes
believe it.
too hot for the
I
igloos.
Uh-huh.
actually believe it. Yeah.
Blogs and videos
Yeah.
are probably my go-to ones because people are a lot more personal in
Yeah.
blogs and a lot more of their voice shines through. And then videos, you actually get to hear people, you hear when they're genuine or excited about things, you get to actually see things. And a lot of times, if someone's doing like a vlog about a restaurant or something, like I
Yeah.
don't take necessarily their perspective into account because everyone on the internet has like they have a persona that they have to an extent. Even
Yeah.
here, there we might not consciously choose to do it, but we have our kind of online personalities. So but you look at the video and you see how people in the restaurant are acting, or you see how people in a park are acting, and for the most part, I mean, people be people.
Yeah.
They're just people in different places, but how they interact with their environments and that sort of stuff is what I kind of look for.
There's a lot of good references on YouTube of people just walking, like on the street. People will just videotape themselves walking down the street in a certain
Yeah.
town or wherever it is, and those are really interesting to watch because it's not staged. It's not like somebody
Hmm.
doing some kind of a presentation or anything. It's just literally walking down the street, and you can generally hear like the sounds, like what does the traffic sound like? What do the birds sound like? It's interesting and I know this is off topic, but it's interesting the way atmosphere sounds in certain places is very
Mhm.
different from other places. And if you can get that down, it gives your writing a lot of credibility.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I also like looking at historical, like documentaries or like little snippets, like little PBS things or something, that give you just a tiny insight. And then I take that little piece of historical information, part of one of the books that I wrote was set in Texas Hill Country,
Mhm.
which I didn't know was even a thing. And then I
Right.
learned like this one historical fact that I can't even remember. And I'm like, okay, now we go here, here, and here. And this is ultimately what I came up with for like a subplot in that story based off of this one tiny video that I saw. And that's
Nice.
just the fun in, having an imagination.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
all right. So I want to focus us on themes to start because that is exercise one of the template here, where it's titled "What's It All For?" And I think that's important because you can tell a story, and a story can be fun and it can be entertaining, but it becomes a lot more meaningful when it has a message to share. So I want to know from your perspectives, you two,
Yep.
how, like, first of all, do you have any themes you want to share in your story? And then if you do, how do you go about incorporating those or brainstorming them? If you don't, what's your process for kind of getting to it as you're writing?
I don't
Okay.
know that. Go
Go
ahead,
go
Hank.
go ahead, Josh. No, you go ahead.
I don't know that I have any like high level themes that I'm trying to address in the book. One of the aspects of the book uh, is it okay to do a thing that's against the rules, but it's moral or it's the right thing to do? And in this particular case, the team that's down there isn't technically supposed to be there, and they're not technically on official duties. They're helping out a friend, and through the course of helping out a friend, they kind of get involved in more important, like geopolitical events, and then it becomes a if we get found out down here or something goes wrong, bad things can happen. But does that prevent us from trying to do the right thing and to save the people that we need to save? So it's not, it's not a theme on is war justified or anything like that. It's just kind of a personal level of responsibility, and how do you navigate that? How do you continue on a mission that isn't it doesn't have very personal stakes to you, but it is the right thing to do.
Yeah. I would argue in some respects that's even a more important or relatable theme than something more grand, more like
Mm,
worldwide, because people
right.
can see themselves maybe not in the same situations on like a spec ops mission in South America, but when do you have to maybe do the wrong thing for the greater good or
Yeah.
whatnot?
Well, and I don't know. I try to make my stories not world ending, right? Like I
Mhm.
don't like having the ticking time bomb on a nuclear clock where the world's going to end if they don't do A, B, and C. I like to have real personal stakes. So even if they're not uh 100% relatable, people can empathize with the stakes because they understand like the personal nature of what's going on. And it's because you talk about, it's an interesting thing. You talk about like war in terms of like how people feel about it. If you know someone that died in war, you're going to have very personal feelings about it. But then when you talk about the hundreds of thousands of lives that were lost in like one of the world wars, that number doesn't mean anything. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
have a personal resonance with you, the same way that it would if you knew personally that a person was killed. And so I try to keep those stakes very small because I don't think people like movies do it and it's fine and all that, but it's not interesting. It's not like it's hard to relate to.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Hank,
I
what about you?
almost n I almost never think about theme ahead of time. Um, Almost always a story begins and ends with me with the characters, with a character's journey. And invariably, I will get to the end of the story and look back on it and see theme all over it. But it
Mm,
wasn't something I set out to do. It just kind of, if it's your subconscious processing some or whatever it is, but it always emerges, but it almost never happens in the beginning for me. Um, like I said earlier, I decided to change the book I'm writing, and one because this story that I'm working on has kind of been bothering me for a couple of months, and it's something I started working on during our writing sprint Wednesdays. Was just
Right.
this funny idea that I had, and I just kind of wanted to see where it would go. And but it's one of those, you have ideas that they're like, oh, that's a good idea, and then you have those that just stick with you, and they're like, this is something more than just a good idea. It's something that somewhere deep inside me I want to write for whatever reason. Um, and I came to realize that the other story that I was thinking about writing, I just didn't care about. I just couldn't. It just wouldn't connect with me deeply enough to care about. And so I was like, well, maybe that's for another time, or maybe that's an idea for somebody else, whatever. Um, so I started thinking about it, and initially I had this idea of kind of a grand theme of light versus dark, good versus evil. I mean, I know that's super vague and kind of trite, but it really
We all
was
love
kind
it.
of this. Yeah, it kind of was this good versus evil, this kind of grand showdown. Um, and then last week we had a death in our family as someone I was extremely close to, and I got to deliver part of the eulogy over this past weekend, and been thinking a lot about life and death, and um, the impact we have on the world while we're here, and then what it ultimately means to pass on and to go through that full cycle of life. And the story I started thinking about is about a man who makes a deal with the devil at the mythical crossroads. Which, if you're familiar with any kind of Southern folklore or whatever, the crossroads is a place where you make a deal with the devil. And Robert Johnson, the famous blues man in the 1920s, made a deal with the devil. And anyway, it's this whole folklore thing. If you're not familiar with it, Google it. It bring up lots and lots of stuff. But this man makes a deal with the devil that he never has to die, and but because of that, he's cycling. And then after he makes a deal with the devil tells him the other part of the deal, and that's that ever so often he has to bring someone to the crossroads, and he has to sacrifice someone, basically. So his
Eh,
deal with the devil is he gets eternal life, but it's at the cost of someone else. And I started thinking about if you could live forever, but it cost you something, it cost your soul something, and every time you had to pay up, it it eroded more and more of your soul. What would happen if you could ultimately get out of the bargain? And would death be something that you could actually long for, to get back into the um the cycle of life that's supposed to happen? Like, you're not meant to get out of the cycle of life. You're meant to go through it. And it's part of being human. And what would it mean to step out of that? And what would that, bring about a greater toll than just dying? So anyway, so I started thinking about those themes, and I started realizing there's an actual theme to the story. Like, these are actual issues that I want to work through, and I want to. So that's I've this has never happened to me before, that I started thinking this early in the process about themes that were coming up, but it absolutely has, and it's making an impact on how I write the outline.
Yeah. Wow.
And the
Well,
intro
I
is
got
really
nothing to say with that.
intriguing. I got to read
Yeah.
the intro this week, and it was very, very intriguing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Andy here saying, I like to think of themes as something I want to explore with my writing and not something I want to teach about, which is,
Yeah.
I had a little bit of an epiphany as you were speaking there, Hank, in that I think even whether you go in thinking of a theme or not, it's so intrinsically tied to stuff like character arcs and the plot that you're
Mhm.
sharing that I think we don't necessarily choose our themes, we discover them. And you either
Right.
discover them at the beginning or you discover them when you look back and say, okay, I
Yep.
did X, Y, and Z. That actually makes a message or a theme that I want to share, which makes it very organic too. And yeah, that story sounds fantastic. I also have the opening in a Slack message. I've just been too busy to read it, but now I have
Yeah.
to get to it because it
Yeah,
sounds
we
too
know.
good.
Yeah, it's changed since I sent that to you, by the way. But
Okay.
anyway, yeah.
David here saying my main character is from my first novel and this is his story afterwards. I just wanted to see what he was up to, but now I'm trying to fix a flaw in him, and that gave me my theme there. See,
Love it.
discovering it.
Very
So,
nice.
so with the exercises in the template, I guess rather than being prescriptive, which they were never intended to be, use them as a form of discovery. Answer however many you want. Pick the ones that work with you. Like there's some that prompt you to think about conflict or dialogue or the end of your story. You don't have to answer all of them. You don't have to answer any of the questions in the the template. That's up to you. But this specifically is just meant to help you discover these things. Steph here, my theme is reverse age gap romance. Why? Equal rights and romance. Perfect. Excellent. For me, I didn't start this process thinking about a theme to grow my story around, but I did have that internal conflict that I wanted my protagonist to go through, and the theme has been pulled from that. And it's a theme about self-worth and how you can't help folks around you if you hate yourself. So like growth starts from within. And I've used that, like her arc is all about that. And so most of the story, it being a shorter novel, only 50,000 words, most of the story does have elements to that theme. And I'll show that off when we talk about the plot grid later. Specifically how I don't want to be so ham-fisted with the theme that I'm using the plot grid to make sure it's not every single scene is talking about how she doesn't feel worthy until she does. Right?
Yeah.
And I encourage everyone in the chat, in addition to the folks that have already shared here, just let us know if you have any themes that you are thinking about including in your story, or themes that you just really like from other stories. I mean, everyone loves a good versus evil story. The twist is that Hank writes it where good wins, and my entire solo series is that evil one to start the whole thing off. So
That's
I don't
funny.
know.
That's funny. Andy's comment, I like to think of theme as something I want to explore with my writing and not something I want to teach about. You said, Doug, that you're using the plot grid to make sure that you're not ham-fistedly just shoving your thoughts down, your reader's throat. And I think that's a important thing, like Andy said, to make sure that it's organically coming out, that this is a discovery the character is making, and not something that Andy is, trying to beat readers over the head with. I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah. Yeah. Theme does best when it's subtle
Yeah.
and when the reader has to kind of figure it out. I don't think any character should ever say good triumphs over evil or I believe in myself, so I'm going to win. That's,
Right.
and maybe for like children's books, that kind of
Right.
stuff works, but for
Yeah.
No, I think
adults,
the more enjoyable books to read are the ones where the reader is making the determination on which character is actually right, and even in you read a book like uh, we talked about Abercrombie in the first law and all of that, and most of those characters do a lot of really gnarly things, and there's not really a character where you can point to and go, "This is the hero." You've just got
Yeah.
to, you just kind of got to like
mhm,
pick your own out, and you have to make a determination on whether or not the character is doing right for you or not. But a lot of times it's a matter of perception, and I find it interesting where some people it will side with character A and say the character B is the bad guy, and then the exact opposite is true for other members of the audience. And I love those kinds of stories, just because the author isn't prescribing a good or evil; it's just presenting the story and letting people kind of decide on their own, which doesn't work for every story, but it is an interesting aspect of theme to work with to play around with that, and it starts a lot of good conversation around the books too.
yeah, absolutely.
Brit-
And you can
Brittany's got a great comment here on a pop up. The theme I'm interested in for my historical fiction is the rising cost of new technology. I love this idea, and this is something that I explore a lot. If it weren't for the internet and new technology, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing right
Mhm.
now. And one of the reasons that I first fell in love with Dabble is that as you start typing, all of the sidebars and the menus just evaporate, and it goes to a distraction free writing environment, and which is kind of the antithesis of all the technology that enables us to do what we do. And I love living in that tension that we get to do what we do because of this. And we also look for opportunities every time we can to strip all that away. And
Oh yeah,
I,
for
I,
sure.
I
yeah.
love that theme, and I love living in that struggle.
Um Also, Brittany saying historical fiction with the rising cost of new technology. You can strip historical from that.
Yeah.
But that's a
Right.
conversation for another day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to the second exercise that
Yeah.
is in the template, and that is just plotting. Plotting using the plot grid specifically, since everyone participating in the challenge has access to Dabble for this. But you can ultimately plot however you want. It's just you have this powerful tool, might as well use it. So I want to turn it to you two fine gentlemen, and like I said at the beginning, we all have our different ways of plotting. So why don't we talk about how we plot our novels and how we're specifically plotting this one?
So
We'll
for
go to Josh
me,
first. Oh, okay,
yeah,
no, we'll go
okay.
to Hank first.
No,
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 Hank,
no,
go
no.
ahead, buddy.
No. I was just gonna say that I've just started replotting this novel because I started a new novel.
Fair.
So I started with kind of my take on the snowflake method. Come up with a single sentence, or I think it was actually two sentences that I came up with. And let me pop up my Dabble project here, and um this was that kind of initial thought was Buddy Deadweiler sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads. Now he wants it back. So I started with that. That kind of sums
The
up.
back blurb statement.
Yeah. So, and then from there, I started, okay, now what does this mean? And I started kind of coming up with I think I wrote 4 or 5 paragraphs of just, if I could do a super high level of kind of what happens, and then I start from there. And then for this novel, because we're doing a 30-day challenge, I said, well, I'll do a 30 chapter outline. That way I can kind of focus on a chapter each day, hopefully. If it, if we're thinking, you know, perfect scenario here. So I came up with 30 chapters, and then I, broke it down in 3 acts. This act needs to accomplish this. This act needs to accomplish this. This act needs to accomplish this. And then I just started kind of giving each chapter, each one of those 30 chapters, a kind of high point, what this chapter needs to do. And now I'm in the process of breaking out like 5 chapter beats for each one of those, so that when I sit down to write each day, I know exactly what I need to accomplish. And then I'm going to plug those into, that'll be kind of my main column in the plot grid. And then I'm going to have a column for my main characters, and there's going to be some pretty hefty flashbacks in there. And I'll do another column for flashbacks, so I can see kind of bird's eye view what I'm focusing on there, and then I can also see what's getting more focus than other places and try to even that out. But that's kind of how I'm approaching it right now.
Excellent.
For this book, I've actually, this is kind of a rewrite from a different project that I started a couple of years ago. It's not technically a rewrite, but I'm taking some scenes and sequences from that original story and kind of incorporating it here.
Yeah.
But what I'm doing right now is I'm kind of punching in the main plot threads that I need to hit, and then connecting them backwards. So, like in the plot grid, I'll just create a new plot point for, uh, like for instance, I've got one for picking up the daughter from a cafe, which kind of is around the inciting incident, and then I kind of just create other cards and move them around. And in this um, stage, I don't really have any chapters lined out. I don't know where all the points are going because I don't know everything that I need to connect everything else. What I have
Mhm.
done though is, and what I typically do is, I'm aiming for this book to be around 100,000 words. And so I kind of do some math and figure out where I want and where I need things to be at. So the inciting incident needs to be around 10 or 15% of the book, which puts about chapter 5, 6, 7 ish. And then I figure out, okay, what can I put in before that? And what do I need to set the stage for everything? And then I figure out where I want more of a turn at, and then I kind of backtrack on how many words I have to play with until I get there. And then I know, just by the way I write, I know I'm probably going to need between 25 and 25,000 words to write the end sequence for, all the battle, the chases, whatever else happens in there. And so I've got to backtrack and set where I need those chapters to start at. And so, like for this particular book, I'm probably going to have to start around chapter 35. I usually try to average out my chapters to be about 2,000 words each. Sometimes they're a little longer, sometimes they're a little shorter, but on average they're 2,000. So for 100,000 words, you're gonna have 50 chapters, and so I just kind of work around that. I don't typically do a lot of post climax resolution. I'll have maybe one chapter as a resolution, maybe two, and then probably a chapter to set up either the next book or something else. And so I just kind of mess around with the grid a little bit and figure out. Inevitably, usually I have too much and I have to cut some stuff out. Usually I figure that out while I'm writing, because in the outline, in my grid, I'm on, let's just say I'm looking at chapter 6 going, okay, this is where I need this to happen. And then when I start writing, those chapters get longer, and then I've got to reorder some things and push some stuff around to make it work. Uh, but I try to keep it really, really loose. And that's one of the things I like about the plot board itself. Even though I may use it incorrectly, I can drag some stuff around and have, the ribbons. I color code the ribbons for characters most of the time, so I know, like at a glance, I've got 10 POVs that are red, which is my main character, all in a row. I need to break that up a little bit. So I put in a secondary POV or something else. And a lot of times those extra POVs add uh, more words that I've got to kind of work around. I'm trying to do something in this book that I started doing in Weaponized, which was kind of setting up like a little teaser sequence before the main deal, either from a tertiary character or a secondary character point of view, or even the bad guy point of view. There's no wrong way to use the grid. That's right. That's right, Hank.
That was Alicia, one of our developers, and she should know.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very good tool in terms of the way I visually outline, and the color coding is amazing. The only thing, Alicia, the only thing I would love to see is a way to manipulate the board and then connect it with like arrows. Kind of like it's an old, I don't even know if they still use it, but it was an old thing called Scapple that was kind of connected to Scrivener.
Yeah.
But you could create cards and drag them around and connect them with lines. And I'd love to be able to like draw a line between different cards to be able to kind of work around that.
Mind
mapping.
Yeah.
Noted. No, but and Alicia brings up a good point, and Andy reinforced it there. There's no wrong way to use the plot grid. It's such a versatile tool that you use it however you want to use it. And for those who weren't around for it, Josh did a workshop for Dabble Premium where he showed off how he used the plot grid his way, which was cool. And I think it inspired a lot of people. I also, before I explain my own plotting and show my plot grid, I just want to say hello to Veronica from Kent in the UK. I hope you're feeling better after your little bout with COVID. It stinks. So
yeah, it does. Glad to have you back with us, Veronica.
So for my plotting for this novel, like I said, I tend towards more plotting for any story that I do. I like to do the work beforehand, so I have less work to do afterhand. I don't think that's a word. But I really kind of went further with this, just so I could show it off a little bit more for folks who are maybe new to the plot grid or don't know its capacity. So I'm going to add mine here, and I know it's a little tough to see. Depends on the size of your screen, I guess, but and our face is taking up valuable real estate, but you got to deal with that. So I have here on the left, you have the scenes, and then I have all these different plot lines. They're called plot lines technically, but not all of them are plot lines. And that's something that I want to point out. So I have my scenes here, and I went ahead and made my chapters, but things will inevitably change. I'll add more scenes. I'll move scenes to different chapters. Like if I wanted to move this scene here from chapter 2 to chapter 1, it's as easy as literally dragging it, and then you'll see it's under the chapter 1 heading now. I also tag my scenes with the character from whose perspective we're seeing the world from. In this one, I only have 2, well, 3 if we scroll all the way down, but 2 main ones, and it's mostly my protagonist. In like my normal series, I'll have 4 different perspectives, maybe 5, so you'll see a lot more colors there. But what I also did, and this was a first for me, but I like it, and so I'm going to keep doing it in the future. I have my protagonist's internal journey or arc in this first plot line here, and I've tagged all the ones where a negative thing happens to her, or like the result of her flaw, or she makes backwards progress towards being a better version of herself, as yellow, and then positive progress as green. And so it's mostly yellow. I write sad stories, but it's not all yellow. And if I went through this and I only saw yellow, or I saw an overwhelming amount of green, I know that the pacing's off. Right. And so that's a way for me to visually identify it. Thank you. I also have a plot line for a relationship arc that I want. I also threw in one for the setting. So this is going to be in a suburban area, residential, large yards and houses, lots of cars, corpses everywhere, humans trying to flee. It's a war. Then I have one for the theme. I have one that's going to be pretty empty, but details from my existing books that I want to sprinkle in there, either to connect them or as just little, ooh, that's from the other book too. Then 2 other plot lines, some human character development, because my perspective characters here are an angel and a demon, and then the gang subplot, which I don't know much about. I'm going to pants most of that, but I know that the sequel to this will revolve around this gang that takes control of where this story takes place. So I want to start sprinkling a little bit of that in. And again, knowing that if this entire column had like one card in it, I would know that there's not enough sprinkling for me. There might be for some folks, there isn't for me. With all of this put in here, I gotta say, you don't need to do all of this. You can do more than this. It's up to you. It's versatile. It's the plot grid. But when you do punch all these things in, if we then go to one of the scenes, you'll see it on the right here under the notes. You'll see all of those. But if you expand that out far enough, you'll actually see the notes that you make in each of those note cards. So you don't always have to click back to here to open it up. You can just expand it out. Now, I usually keep it like that when I'm typing. Focus mode kicks in. I don't see it. But if I did want those notes handy to me, you can always expand it out like that. And you can collapse this a little bit. You'll also see... Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry. I was going to say that Jane said would love to know how to add those
Excellent.
colors. And since you have your grid up, would you just show really quickly how to add those?
So if you hover over any of these, can we see my mouse on? Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Okay. If you hover over any of these, the 3 dots down here, you're going to add a ribbon. It defaults to having the cursor in there, so you can type in, example, and then you can choose the color. If you do that and then say you want to edit it, you can just double click to change that.
Yeah.
And then you can remove ribbon like that. When you color code your scene, it will color code a little bit on the side here in your manuscript, so you can see at a glance what you've color coded it as. You can use color coding to do whatever the heck you want. I use it for characters in that column. I use it for progress in the arc in that second column. I might use it for something else in a different column. It's up to you.
I usually use a different colored ribbon for the acts that I'm in, just so that at a glance I can see where I am, and that helps my brain to kind of segment that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you can also do, I might have shown this off in a different one, but if you just click on plot, you come to this little tutorial page. You can create a generic plot grid that doesn't have a scene associated with it. So you can just play around with whatever, grid structure you want and whatever plot lines you want there.
Yeah. And that's very helpful if you have a subset of your story that you're not exactly sure how that's going to work out. You can create one of these unattached plot grids and play around with different scenarios so that you can map it out without messing up your existing plot grid. That's what I do sometimes. That's very helpful for if you're kind of scattered or brained and just want to see how something's going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to point out in some places when you're plotting, again, plot as much as you want. So you look here, you might not be able to see it super well, but this one's titled hiding out in ? Because I have no idea where they're hiding out in yet. That's something that I'm going to figure out as I'm writing or over the next week. Don't think that just because the card is there, you need to know all the details. Here, I don't even have, point forms in this one because my head's not there yet. So do whatever works for you. Do as much as you want, as little as you want. Just make it work for you. That's the whole point of the tool. Let me put our mugs back up there. Alicia saying here, you can do chapters in the book from the notes pane. Same thing with the notes. Oh, I see what you're saying. This part. So you can have chapter notes here that you can just jot down notes that you want. Same
You're no
thing.
longer sharing that,
notes.
Doug.
Oh, how embarrassing.
Fail.
I can't believe you let me do that for 3 whole seconds.
Well,
so if you click on the book, you also have notes. You click on a chapter, you also have notes. And if you put anything there for chapter-wide notes, you can include it there. And when you click on the chapter, then you have both scenes. Well, in this case, I have 2 scenes. You might have however many. How embarrassing. I'm going to live with this shame forever.
I really like the way that you can see the notes while you're writing. And like for me, I do a lot of like shorthand plotting, but being able to make a card, write a lot of shorthand notes in the card, and then when I'm writing, go into that particular document, and while you're writing, those notes are just there for you to write from. That it's helpful to me anyway as I'm
Mhm.
going through and writing, because I can look to the side there on that sidebar instead of either if you're working in Word or Pages or something like that, having multiple documents open where you're trying to follow like your outline or whatever else, and your screen's just covered in documents. And here you can just have it right next to you while you're writing, if you need it. And like Hank said, it'll go away if you don't need it. But that helps me keep on track a lot when I'm drafting.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. The less clicks you have to do when you're drafting, the better. Right? So the more information you can have either immediately available or one click away, the easier it's going to be to stay in the zone and to just keep those words going. The worst case scenario for me is when I have to take like a 10-minute pause to figure something out or Google something. Then it's just, writing session over. I might as well go do something else. Not really. I'll go back to it because that's how dedication works, but it's a struggle to go back to it.
Yeah.
If I'm on a good writing sprint or session, if I come up to something like that, I usually just hit the caps button and write down in the
Mhm.
document, like I need a name here or research this here, and then just keep going. Because most of the
Yep.
time, it really doesn't affect the thing that I'm actually writing. It's just the whatever the color that adds to the scene, and so I'll go back and get it later after I'm done.
When I come up to something like that, I'll put it inside curly braces, or or brackets, and then when I'm done, I go back and search for curly braces because that'll
Mhm.
never show up in my book unless it's me leaving a note for myself, and I
Right.
go back and fill in those things.
We had a question here. Sorry,
Andy said, "Can you print the plot grid?"
yeah. You can't print it in its grid form. Alicia, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I'm confident that I'm not. What you can do is export it to a Word document or a Google document. Now it doesn't retain the grid format, but it will have all your notes sectioned out by headers in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So Alicia confirmed there. Um, yeah. So if you have any other questions about the plot grid, drop them in the chat. I'm happy to answer them as we go. If we don't have the answers, that's Alicia's hanging out, being the most helpful person in the world. So
One thing
she'll
that
have
I've
answers.
done
Yeah.
is screenshot the plot grid,
Yep.
and then, scroll down to the next section, screenshot that, and at least then I can print it, but then I also have the visual representation so that my brain, kind of keeps it formatted there.
Yeah. So we see here. Here's my plot grid because I just saw Jane asking you can export it from the plot grid page. The three dots, export to Word or Google Docs. Then
Yeah.
you can choose the name. It'll export it for you. Um, Dang it, I had a really good joke lined up too at Hank's expense, and I just lost it trying to be helpful. Shoot. Um,
That's actually
so
the feature that you just described, printing it out. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have information written in the note card,
Mhm.
in the card itself, when you export it, you'll have the heading of the card and then the note underneath it,
Yeah.
Right.
and then it prints out the text. What I've done in previous projects is I'll do something like that, not through Dabble, but uh, I will do it through Dabble this time, but yeah, I'll have that printed out. But then what I do is I'll add like if you export it to Word and then you add a comment in Word, what happens is it prints out the page, but it prints out with the comment on there. And instead of
Mhm.
having the text on the full page margin, it shifts the text over and gives you that space where the comment
Hmm.
section is actually positioned on the page. And then I go through and do handwritten notes on that portion of the page that's open, to go through and kind of edit hand. I like doing a lot of things with pen and paper. I feel like it's a lot easier for me sometimes when I'm planning, to line things out instead of just typing and all of that. I can go through and line things out or draw arrows to different things, and that's really helpful too, to give you that space.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris
Chris,
said my joke had to do with curly brackets.
yeah,
No, actually, I remembered my joke. Like, it's not gonna
do
work
do not
now.
encourage this man, Chris. You know, when you go to the zoo and it says don't feed the animals, same thing here.
I was gonna say Hank screenshots the plot grid and then puts it as his desktop background to replace the photo of me that he has there. But like, it doesn't work now. It would have worked in the moment. So
Yeah, it just seems super creepy at this point, Doug.
But not unrealistic.
I
there
mean,
you go. And you're welcome, Andy. Jane, yes, we will we'll get a good plot grid tutorial pinned to the YouTube channel sooner rather than later. Okay, so that's the plot grid. That's how we plot in our own unique ways. One of the things that I also wanted to point out is that as I'm filling out the plot grid, as I'm going through the action of plotting, it inspires other things. And I'm often, doubling back to a previous scene to jot down some notes based off of something that I've come up with earlier. Like, oh, I want to do this in this scene, so I'm going to jump back and add a jot note, need this, right? And that's how you grow organically while plotting, and then you have all of that to use when we hop into the actual writing part. Can you do detail in them in the cards? Here, I'll also quickly show, assuming that's what the question is. So for this one, for example, I jotted down actual paragraphs of a summary, but then in this one I did jot notes. So however much detail you want, that's what you can do. You can also, if you just keep typing, it's just going to keep expanding. So you got plenty of room. Let me get rid of that so I don't wonder what the heck's going on when I go use that after.
and if you go off the screen, it'll just scroll. You can just
Yeah.
add all that you want to in there.
I have my desktop has a massive screen right now, so it would take a while for us to get there.
You talking about the picture of me?
Okay, so we have one more thing we want to chat about today from the template, and this ties in directly to what I was just speaking about, which is the more you plot now, the easier it's going to be to write in November, because we are trying to cram 50,000 words into 30 days. You're already working, raising kids, you have friends, family, other hobbies, got to do the laundry, all this stuff, right? Hours are finite. We already don't have enough of them. So how do we make it as easy as possible? Well, you do some planning ahead of time. But to keep you motivated, to keep you pushing through when it's like day 16, you've written, 1,600 words a day for the last 2 weeks. How do we get there? The easiest way, goals. Goals, I mean, love them or hate them, there's proven science behind good goal setting that it helps you stay on track. And one of the best parts, my favorite parts about goal setting, is the rewards that you combine with it. Right? One might argue a good goal is its own reward, but I like a good goal and a reward. And we break it down in the template into whatever milestone really works for you. But I'm going to share mine, and then I'm going to turn it to you two in just a second here. But I mapped out, I might not be able to see super clearly with the screen share, but I have 3 different milestones that I want to hit. The 1667 words every day. And the rewards for that, an hour of guilt-free video games every now and then, a nice fancy coffee that costs, $5 rather than a $2 coffee, a movie rental, but I put max $6.99 because sometimes you can get like $30 movie rentals these days. No. That would break the bank. If I did that every day, that's $1,000 in movies. No, thank you. Then I have 11,669 words, which is just weekly. It's this, but weekly. So the dates I have for that, the 7th, the 14th, the 21st, the 28th. And I put down 4 different options here. An excursion. My brother's getting married in Jamaica, so I'm going to be away for a little bit in November. So I'm like, hey, if I make the first week, I'm going to treat myself to something off the resort. Order lunch one day, a movie night. That's when we get into the expensive movies. And then a video game night. And then 50,000 words by November 30th, the ultimate goal, a bottle of whiskey. put the optional E in here for our international, depending on how you spell it, right? And that's tradition for me. Every time I finish the first draft of something, I will go and buy myself a bottle of whiskey. For this, because it's 50,000 words, I was thinking there's an Irish whiskey called Writer's Tears, and I think that's just appropriate. So I will probably go and get that.
I have had that whiskey.
It's surprisingly good. Like I expected it to be bad,
right.
but it's not bad. So
I'm a straight bourbon guy. I
yeah.
love bourbon, and the more fire it puts in my mouth and causes me pain on my gums, the better it is. And I'm the type of guy that if anybody wants to do like Coke and whiskey, I'm like, no, just give me the whiskey. I
Hold the
want to
coat.
feel the burn. Yeah. No ice, no
Uh,
ice.
Josh, how do you stay motivated to write day after day, especially for something that will be 50,000 words in 30 days?
Um, I don't know that I don't have a really good system about staying motivated. I'm one of those guys that really enjoy the process of it. And for me, an average day for me is about 2,000 words, and I
Nice.
can do that pretty regular, fairly easy. I've had days where I go to 4, 5, 6,000, and days where I get like 100 and then throw my hands up
Mhm.
and walk away from the computer.
Yeah.
So, um, I just been doing it for so long, kind of professionally, that it's just my job, and
Hmm.
so I just do it like any other job. I just sit down and punch them out. Um, I like playing video games. I have to curb myself sometimes because sometimes I do the reward before I finish the writing. And so I've really got to pay attention to that. But I mean, sometimes I do it in reverse where I'll play, video games for half the day and then grab my laptop and write for a couple hours, or I'll wake up and feel particularly inspired and snag a couple thousand words before I do anything else. Um, but for me, it's just I like doing it. I actually enjoy writing the words. Like I have a lot of tattoos, but I hate getting tattoos. I love having them. I hate getting them. Uh, but with the writing, especially if the story is flowing and everything's working, it's super easy to sit down and knock out a couple of thousand words. And I typically do, in another writers group we have a Discord where we'll do like writing sprints where we'll go for half an hour or whatever, and usually I average about 5 to 600 words in those sessions. And so, I give myself an hour, 2 hours a day, knock out 2,000, 3,000 words and call it square. The times when it's hard is when the story's hard. And then
Yeah.
you kind of get bogged down. But, for this, well, for most of my writing in particular, I aim for 10,000 a week. If I can get 10,000 a week, that works for me. I'll have to up that a little bit, just so I can get to 50,000. But I just average that over the week. So if I get 1,000 words on one day, I'm not stressing because I know another day I'll get a couple, 2, 3,000. And typically it works out that way.
And Hank, before I ask you about yours, I will show everyone before we're done here how to set up the goal in Dabble, or how actually it's going to be done automatically for you. But that will help you with those days when you say write 200 words because you're really just not feeling it. It will adjust for you, which is great. So, and yes, and as Alicia just pointed out, Dabble's day off feature is great for that, and
Yep.
I'll show that off too. But Hank, how do you stay on track? How do you stay motivated?
I don't know. I don't have a solid reward system. I think I just get excited about the story ahead of time, and just kind of carries me through.
Except for 2 days ago,
Except for 2 days
it
ago.
was your old story.
That's but part of that is spending some time with the story before you start writing to know if it's something that you want to write. And if it's something like if I start feeling, and I've done this before, where you have this it's a pretty good idea, but you aren't maybe passionate about it, and you'll get 20, 30,000 words in, and it just kind of runs out of gas, and you kind of realize, well, this was probably not what I should have been writing in the first place. And I've learned over the decade of writing to spend a little time before you start writing to make sure it's what you do. I really care about this? Can I see the different possibilities of where the story's going to go? And if I can think of multiple possibilities of how this could go or this, then it generally means that I'm passionate about it and I really want to figure this out. If I easily come to a solution to a problem and don't care to think about other ways this could go, that's generally a sign that this is not something I really care that deeply about. And for me, it's just about caring about the story ahead of time, and that usually carries me through it. And then, of course, at the end of it, you've got, bragging rights of, this is another thing I accomplished. But that's how I think about it.
Yeah, and I mean, we're almost up to 500 people in the Storycraft Cafe signed up for this challenge, which is fantastic. And I think every single one of them is excited for the story that they're going to tell, right? And we're all excited for our stories,
as it should be.
Yeah, yeah, it's going to be a very fun time. What I do want to point out is that we are aiming for 50,000 words in a month. Some people are writing a 50,000 word novel. Some people are writing a 100,000 word novel or part of a 200,000 word novel. When it comes to setting your goals, I want everyone to be realistic about goal setting and the time they can allot to this. If you can write 500 words in an hour and you only have an hour every day to spare, don't get down on yourself for not hitting 50,000 words in a month. You're hitting, whatever that math works out to, 15,000 and a half words. That's still a fantastic number, right? Don't take this and say, oh, I didn't hit 50,000, so I failed. You just got to work within what you have the limitations of, and life plays into that, ability plays into that, all of that. But to help out for both this challenge and if anyone's participating in NaNoWriMo, which the word counts are the same, so Dabble we're going to be putting on a heck of a lot of events in November. We've kind of teased this a little bit, but one of the things that we are absolutely putting on are daily, Monday to Friday daily writing sprints. So the normal weekly writing sprints that we have, we will be having one every single day, Monday to Friday, throughout the entire month of November. So if you need some help staying accountable for your writing and just that companionship and that excitement that comes with it, we will be live every single day getting those written. So that will help with the word count. We'll also have some other exciting events going on. One of them is a workshop with Sarah Cannon, who is a friend of the show and a fantastic author, fantastic writing YouTuber. Hank, do you have like a 1 or 2 sentence summary about what her workshop is?
Hold on just a second. Let me see if I can.
One of the I think the best things about a challenge like this, especially for the people involved, is that normally in a writer situation, as a writer, you're doing it by yourself, and it's really hard to motivate yourself. I mean, even if you're giving yourself like rewards, like you're talking about, it's really hard to motivate yourself to keep going, and knowing that other people are doing it and potentially struggling right along with you is inspiring, at least for me anyway. I mean, I sit in my office by myself all the time, and I'm like, why am I the only one who is bashing my face against my computer trying to make it do what I want it to do? But just the knowledge that other people are doing the exact same thing it's inspiring for me, just to keep pushing forward. I love that.
Yeah. Well, and we get to celebrate our wins with each other too.
Right.
So every time we do like a 20-minute sprint and people say, oh, I got 400 words written. Fantastic. We love hearing that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I believe that Sarah's workshop is going to be finding the joy in writing and how it's the most magnetic way to bring readers to your work.
Excellent. I love that. And when it comes to finding joy in things, Sarah is great at that. Yeah. So that's going to be a fantastic 100%. Workshop.
Yeah.
I will also be putting on a workshop on November 1st. That is next Friday, and it's already on our YouTube channel. I will share that link so you can hit the notification bell if you'd like. And that's going to be how to win at Nano. And so that is, 4 people participating in Nano, but again, it's the same thing. So if you want some more in-depth tips about how you can succeed over the next month, swing by next Friday for that one. The other big announcement that I wanted to share is that everyone participating in the 60-day novel challenge, and I'm going to show you exactly how you can make sure you're participating, can get 20% off their Dabble subscription for the next year using a special coupon code, which, Alicia, do we have that coupon code, or does it get automatically generated if you're still in the chat? 20% off, though. I'll let Alicia answer that if she's still around. If not, I'll go find it. And if you're successful at the end of it, you get 50% off. If you write that 50,000 words by the end of it, you get 50% off the next year.
That's very cool.
Yeah, I'm very excited for that. I'm very happy that we can bring that to the challenge. And what I want to do real quick, bring us back into Dabble. Okay, Alicia's going to go get that done. It will be ready for November 1st. Don't you worry, folks. But what you want to do, let me just fix my Dabble here. If you click up here in the right and go to NaNoWriMo/challenge, you'll see this spread here. So we're focused on this here, the 60-day challenge. You'll get a check mark if you join the 60-day challenge space, and I'll show you exactly which one, but I think most people here have joined it. And then you might see an X next to the participating in the 60-day novel challenge, and this button here will say join the challenge. Now mine says go to challenge settings because I've already linked it, but you've got to click on that. You'll then go in, it'll pop this up. You choose the Dabble project that you want associated with the challenge. You go to your goals, and this will already have 50,000 words set up, the 30th of November as our goal date. And you can choose days off if you know that you're going to have some days off, and it will automatically adjust your goal for you. You hit save changes, you're good to go. And then your goals are all set up for you. They'll adjust based on how much you write, and you're all set for the challenge. Now, the only other thing I will share is the space that you want to be in. Let me share this tab. Okay, this is the Storycraft Cafe. Here's the 60-day novel challenge. This one that says join, start here. You got to be part of this one. And there will be a join space option here. I'm already joined, so it doesn't show it here, but a join space up here. You can join each of the individual challenge spaces, but I know there are some folks here that have joined the 60 days event, not the actual join start here. You have to be part of this one. Alrighty. So 2 steps, join it, and then set it up in your Dabble. Kara asking, is there a discount for people who sign up for a lifetime membership with Nano? A lifetime membership is my ultimate goal. I will confirm that. I know we, my internet says it's being weird. I know we tend to have a Black Friday sale for lifetime membership as well. Yeah, there you go. So Alicia's saying lifetime not part of the coupon, but there is a Black Friday deal for lifetime. So that will be the last Friday of the month if you want to pick up a lifetime membership. I'm going to take that off the page. Excellent. So those are the big ones. Daily writing sprints, bunch of events. We're going to have even more events than that and a lot more cool stuff coming your way, but I wanted to share those big ones. And then the discount that you get for participating or for succeeding with the 50,000 words. I will make a post in the cafe community tomorrow sharing all of this, so you don't have to keep going back and listening to me rambling for 5 minutes to understand what's going on. Not that I don't like you guys listening to me rambling, but but yeah, so we are over the hour mark. But if there are any other questions, I think we answered any. We have Alicia and Robert answering questions in the chat there too. And yeah, we'll have a cool calendar graphic next week to show off some of the cool stuff we have planned. We have a lot of really cool stuff planned for next month. I'm really excited for it. But we are back here next Thursday, same time, 2 p.m. Eastern for week 5 of the 60-day novel challenge, and we will be discussing writing the first act, the first part of your story, because 12 hours after that, 10 hours for me, we hit November 1st, and then it's time to write.
That's so close.
I know. I had like a little scare moment last week when someone said that it's a week and a half till November. I said, "Oh, I'm not ready," but I'm feeling more ready after doing all these exercises. So
Yeah.
Brittany asking here, do you have any resources on deciding what POV to write? Josh, do you have any advice, or what goes into your decision making when you're talking about POV?
Well, I have two questions. Well, one question that will determine where I go from it. Are you talking about POV in terms of how you're writing the novel, whether in first or third, or are you talking about POV as in which character you're trying to tell the story from in perspective? Because that's it could be different things.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about writing in first or third, um, first is obviously when you're telling the story as an I character. I did this. I did this. Third is when you're using like he or she pronouns. Which character? Um, uh, I always typically write in. Okay, so she's talking about between first and third. I typically write in a very tight third limited, which means I tell it from the perspective of a character, but I only give the reader the information that that character would have at the time. And there are different variations of third where you can kind of do third loose, where you're throwing in the things into the narrative that the character might not have necessarily noticed or seen. Um, I keep it really, really tight into third. And the reason I do that is because I like to show different elements of the books through the eyes of different characters. And there are ways to do that in first person. But in my experience, it's not ever done very well if you have multiple first person accounts. The only time I've ever done multiple first person accounts is in my book Edge of Valor, where the main bulk of the story is written in third limited from the investigator's point of view. And then when he interviews these survivors of this mission, they give him their account of the mission, but the reader gets it in first person from their perspective. And it's an unreliable, and that's a whole other thing. But that's the only time I've ever done that, where I go from first to third. And I have read some books where they are just presented as like the main character is first person POV, and then or the main character is first, and then everybody else is in third person. I've seen that too. It really just depends
That's
on
happening more and more in thrillers and psychological suspense, especially, and I hate it. I don't like this
it's not my
trend.
favorite. Mark Greaney did
No.
it once in one of his books as an experiment, which I applaud him for doing the experiment. But I hate that transition from first to third if it's not like part of the story that you're trying to tell. Um, with first, you get a lot more leeway on how you're presenting the information. You can present it from their point of view in first, and you can kind of be more loose about the description. You can use the character's uh, life and the way he talks and all of that stuff. You can use that as part of the narrative. And in third, I typically have kind of a more stricter narrative style, and I present the narrative in that style, and then use the character voice to play around with that. Um, but first, it's not limiting for me because, well, I don't use it for the most part. But if sometimes I know I have known authors that find first limiting in terms of uh, the amount of story that they can tell, because you're only telling it from one perspective, and sometimes that will affect the total length of your novel. Where if you're aiming for 100,000 words, if you're doing it in first, there are times where you might hit a brick wall and you only can get to 60 because there's not enough of this information. If you're doing third and you have multiple characters, you've got multiple characters to set up, you've got multiple different ways to present each scene, and that gives you a lot more words for your word count. Um, but I like doing third just because I like to jump characters and I like to set up uh, different sequences from the perspective of the different characters. But first is fun because you can, I mean, it's just the character talking, so you don't have a strict
Mhm.
grammatical style or anything like that. You can just write it down the way you think of it and put it on the
Yeah.
page. And a great example of that is The Martian by Andy Weir. That's in first person for the most part, and then you have other parts that aren't. Um, uh, but he does. You can do a lot of more things in that narrative and get away with it because it is in first person rather than third. Uh, it just really
Yeah.
kind of depends on the type of story. I've seen a lot of like not comedic, but a lot of stories that are lighthearted in that aspect, done in first because you can be more lighthearted, I think, in first than you can be in third because third is kind of like uh, uh, a it's just presenting the story, right? And
Yeah.
in first, you can tell it through the narrative almost in a different way.
I like that
For me,
distinction.
since most stories begin with character, that character and their experience usually dictates whether it's going to be first person or third person. Third person limited generally, but this book that I'm going to be writing this time is in third person omniscient because it just it feels like it's a little more spooky and separated, and I feel like that sort of narration gives me some distance from the character and brings a little more mystery there. I
Hmm.
was afraid that first person would let you get too much inside their thoughts, and I
Right.
want there to be a little I want you to feel a little disconnected from the characters. So I
Yeah.
thought first person omniscient would allow for there to be more breathing room between the reader and the characters, for lack of a better explanation.
I have two things I want to add. First is look at your genre that you're writing
Yeah.
into. You don't have to go with what everyone else is doing, but think about why they're doing it that way.
Mhm.
In urban fantasy, for example, it tends to be a lot of first person.
Right.
Hmm.
But it also tends to be a lot of first person, sarcastic, sassy
Right.
characters. And like you
Mhm.
mentioned, Josh, you can get away with that more. If you were like that in third person, it wouldn't translate nearly as well.
Yeah.
Right.
100%. Right.
But you also the limitation of first person and the limitation of third person limited play with that as well. It's not just, you're confined to their perspective. It's how can you play with what they don't know to also influence the story and to rack up tension.
One
But I
of
agree.
No,
Go ahead.
sorry. Finish. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I agree that the multiple perspectives from first person can work. It's just harder to pull off. And it tends to be, and I think I shared this or I said this to Hank during our office hours last week for premium. It tends to be that you label the chapters with whoever the narrator is.
Yep.
Whereas with third person, you don't need to do that. You introduce it a little more organically. And the prose is skewed based off their voice
Right.
to let the reader infer that.
And one of the things that I do is because I'm so limited, I it's almost like it's a quasi first in some instances because
Mhm.
I don't do internal monologue. For the most part, I don't do internal monologue. I
Mhm.
put that into the narrative because
Yep.
that's what the person is thinking, but I write it in third. But you could do it either way. And in first, you're not going to have internal monologue because it's the character telling you the story. One of the examples that I can think of, and we've talked about this before, is the way Abercrombie does what the character says, what they're doing, and what they're thinking, and they're all kind of juxtapositioned against themselves, which gives it kind of an irony. And
Mhm.
you wouldn't be able to do that in first person. You probably could, but it'd be a little bit more difficult in terms of how you set that tone up, but it also goes to the tone in the story too. And I want to touch on really quickly while I'm thinking about it. Andy's question about how do I decide which character to be your POV character. A lot of times, the scene will dictate which character I'm showing. in that particular sequence. Sometimes I'll start and I have like sequences and then scenes in my sequence. So if I'm starting a sequence, that scene could be told from one perspective, and then in that sequence, I shift perspectives to another character to show a different part of the scene. But I always kind of do that as a setup, payoff, turn, transition through the sequence, and it really kind of dictates the scene, or the sequence dictates which POVs I need. So
Mhm.
if I want like an overview of something, like say I'm doing, I don't know, a recon sequence or a secret meet somewhere like at a warehouse, if I want to show that from like the bird's eye view, maybe I'll start the sequence from the perspective of a sniper who can see everything, and he can set up the scene, that, so the reader knows like the warehouse is here, or the group is meeting over here, or whatever it is. And then I can take that and go further on with another scene that narrows it down with another character POV who is in the action, so to speak. And so I just kind of play around with what I need the sequence to do, but also what I want the reader to see as well. And that's just how I play around with it.
I would also add to that, and this is drawing from when Stephen James was on the podcast. Like, what do you need as an author for the scene, but also what do the characters want from that scene?
Right.
And generally, like everyone will want something. The characters all want something, but there will be bigger wants than others, and there will be some that drive the plot or are more interesting. So think about who will be the most interesting character in the scene, and sometimes you play with it in that you then go to a different character who is more observing or playing a secondary role to show that kind of juxtaposition. But generally, you're going to pick the most interesting, invested character um,
Or
for the
you can pick a POV that highlights what your other characters are doing in a
Mhm.
different way. And what I mean by that is some of the things I'm doing in my writing now is I'll have a tertiary point of view with the throwaway character, that will show that my main character showed up and they didn't know he was there. Like he snuck in. Instead of
Mhm.
showing my main character sneaking into a warehouse, I'll show a security guard walking around, and then the main character shows up out of nowhere. And that it 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 gives a little bit of flavor to the book, but it's
Mhm.
also, you're not constantly following and watching the main
Mhm.
character sneak in and do different things. If he's done the same thing, sneaking into a building, let's just say, multiple times throughout the book, we don't need to know that he's good. We don't need to see how he's doing it. We just know that he can do it very well. And so if you are trying to get into a situation like that, and you want to highlight just that he showed up out of nowhere and show it from another perspective of a throwaway character, that's fun, to
Mhm.
me anyway. And the best way to do that is through third limited, and just kind of playing with those POVs.
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely. I forgot to mention, but I posted in the chat there an article to, or a link to a W article about what POV is best for your novel, and it goes over all the different options, but also the headers for the different options links out to articles dedicated to first person, third person limited, omniscient, and even second person, which I caution most people against using too liberally, but it is an option. The
I've
only
read a book with second, that was done in second person, and well, some of the sequences anyway, and the way that they tied it off was that at the end of the book, you realize that this guy is telling his boss what he did, like in an after action briefing, but you're just getting those glimpses of whatever it is. And
Hmm,
it was really interesting. In relation to Brittany's comment about
mhm,
the historical memoir, that requires first, but I might not get enough of the perspectives and development of other people in the story. One of the ways that you can work around that in first is if your character knows those other characters, he can talk about that. He can say, "Oh yeah, this person, if he sees them walking across the field or the street or something, I know that they did this." Or back in the day, they had a problem with so and so, and you can kind of like seed those little things in to give a little bit more color,
Mhm.
even though you're not showing that perspective. It's a little bit of exposition, but in first, you get away with a lot more exposition than you can in
mhm,
third, because you're telling the story in first. And so you can have a couple of paragraphs where the main character is saying, "Oh man, I remember when she walked across the street and kicked that dog." And you can play around with that and seed in a lot of that extra information just from the main character knowing it. That'd be a good way to get around that.
Yeah. I would also say, Brittany, use the plot grid, like plan it out and see, like use that as the 1,000-foot view to see if you're getting as much development as you want. It will take a lot less time to do that than to write the first 30,000 words, realize you don't like this POV, and then redo it, which happens sometimes. People change the POV in their first draft more often than you probably think. But it's not fun to do that.
It's not fun, but depending on how you write the third, I'm losing my mind. Depending on how you write in third, sometimes it's really easy to go back in between the two. Like if you write it in third and you want to go to first, a lot of times you just have to kind of change how you present the information. The same thing from first. You don't have to do a lot of big rework if you're doing it that way. It is tedious to go through and find all the he's and she's and change them to I's or whatever it is, but it's not super difficult if you figure out halfway through you need something else.
Yeah. I know we're wrapping up, but Kara had a comment, and this is a little tongue in cheek, but it might be helpful for this challenge. You forget to go check the Storycraft Cafe. If you go to the settings of your browser and go to the on startup, there's a place where you can set the Storycraft Cafe as your home page. So when you open your browser, it'll go straight there. Like I said, it was a little tongue in cheek, but it might be super helpful during this challenge to, when you want to check in every day, just pop over there first.
I think Kara's used to us too, so
take it for what it's worth. Okay.
I am going to share the link to the Storycraft Cafe right now in case you either want to do that or just go and visit it and make sure you're registered for the challenge. Browse the other spaces there. There's a lot of writers hanging out, asking questions, sharing their work. But yeah, I think we've covered all the questions there. And so, Hank, Josh, thank you very much for a fantastic 60-day novel challenge live stream. Everyone who's watching now, everyone who's watching later, thank you for joining us. I hope that progress is going well in your planning. Remember, at the Storycraft Cafe, you can share the work that you've done so far, the exercises, whether you just want to share for the sake of sharing and holding yourself accountable, or you can tag it for feedback and you can get feedback from your fellow participants. That is the place to do it. If you have any questions, you can ask there. Again, we are back here, same bat time, same bat place, next Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern. We will talk about writing the first act because we are 8 days away from starting this novel.
I'm not ready. I'm not ready.
Well, you have a week.
I still won't be ready.
See you later, everyone.